Imagine you walk into a supermarket. You see thousands of products. You see Coca-Cola and Pepsi. You see Dove and Nivea. You see Kellogg's and General Mills. You think you are looking at a free market. You think these companies are fighting each other for your money. But you are wrong. What you are looking at is the illusion of choice. You don't have a choice. You have an owner. Whether you fly with United Airlines or Delta, whether you bank with JP Morgan or Wells Fargo, whether you search on Google or scroll on Facebook, the profit ultimately flows into the same three pockets. But one of them stands above the rest. One of them is the king of kings, BlackRock. They manage over $10 trillion in assets. To put that into perspective, that is more money than the GDP of Germany and Japan combined. It is more money than almost every country on Earth has in its entire economy. But BlackRock isn't just a bank, and it isn't just an investment firm. It is the fourth branch of government. They are the only company in the world that the U.S. Federal Reserve calls when the economy is crashing. In 2008, the government asked them to save the banks. In 2020, the government asked them to save the corporations. And the man sitting at the top of this pyramid is not the President of the United States. He is a man you might have seen in the news, but you definitely don't know his real power. His name is Larry Fink. He doesn't need to pass laws. He doesn't need to win votes. He just writes a letter to CEOs once a year, and the entire global economy shifts direction. He decides which energy sources we use. He decides which social policies companies adopt. He decides who gets a loan to buy a house and who rents forever. They say money makes the world go round, but in this video, we are going to ask the terrifying question that nobody wants to answer. Who owns the money? We are going to open the books on the company that owns the world. We are going to expose the AI supercomputer called Aladdin that controls the stock market. And we are going to show you their plan for 2030, a world where you own nothing. Welcome to the real hierarchy of power. To understand BlackRock, you first have to wrap your head around the number $10 trillion. That is a 1 followed by 13 zeros. It is hard to visualize, so let me put it this way. If you earned $1 every single second, it would take you over 31,000 years to make just $1 trillion. BlackRock manages 10 times that amount. But here is the biggest misconception. BlackRock is not a bank. Banks, like JP Morgan or Citibank, take your deposits and lend them out. They are heavily regulated. BlackRock is an asset manager. They operate in the shadow banking system. They don't hold deposits, they hold investments. And here is the magic trick of their monopoly. It isn't even their money, it is your money. If you have a pension fund, a 401k, a retirement plan, or if you have ever bought an ETF like the iShares S&P 500, you are giving your money to BlackRock. They take the savings of teachers, firefighters, nurses, and government employees from all over the world. Then they use your money to buy shares in the biggest companies on Earth. But here is the catch. You provide the capital, you take the risk, but BlackRock keeps the power. When they buy shares in Apple or Microsoft using your money, they get the voting rights, not you. This means Larry Fink gets to walk into the boardroom of Apple and say, I control 8% of your company. If you don't do what I say, I will fire the CEO. This is how they control the world without spending a dime of their own wealth. But BlackRock is rarely alone. They usually walk into the room with two other giants, Vanguard and State Street. Together, they are known as the Big Three. Look at the S&P 500, the 500 biggest companies in America. The Big Three are the largest shareholder in 88% of those companies. Think about that. Nearly 90% of corporate America answers to the same three firms. Whether it's Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson, Chevron or Exxon, Ford or GM. On the surface, these companies are competitors, but in the boardroom, the largest owners are exactly the same people. This isn't capitalism. Capitalism requires competition. When the same people own all the competitors, that is not a free market. That is a monopoly, or more accurately, an oligopoly.
And this monopoly doesn't just control products, they control the narrative. They control the media you watch and the news you read. And they do it all with a piece of technology that makes the nuclear bomb look like a toy.
Start with the most famous rivalry in business history, Coca-Cola versus Pepsi. For decades, we have been told that these two giants are fighting a brutal war for your taste buds. They spend billions on advertising. They sponsor the Super Bowl. They fight for shelf space in every supermarket. You are either a Coke person or a Pepsi person. It feels like a fierce competition, doesn't it? But let's look under the hood. If you pull up the financial filings for the Coca-Cola Company, who are the top institutional shareholders? Berkshire Hathaway, Vanguard, and BlackRock. Now let's look at PepsiCo. Who are the top institutional shareholders? Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. The same people own both sides of the war. Now think like a capitalist for a second. If you own a significant chunk of both Coke and Pepsi, do you want them to have a price war? Absolutely not. A price war lowers profits. If Coke lowers its price to $1, Pepsi has to lower its price to $1 to compete. Both companies make less money, and as the shareholder, you make less money. So what do you want? You want them to keep prices high. You want them to cut costs together. You want a truce. This is called horizontal shareholding or common ownership, and it creates a market that looks competitive on the surface, but acts like a monopoly underneath. This is why the price of soda has doubled in the last few years. It's not just inflation, it's the lack of real competition. When the owners are the same, nobody has an incentive to undercut the other guy. But it goes way beyond soda. This pattern repeats in almost every single industry that affects your life. Look at the airlines, United Airlines, Delta Airlines, American Airlines. You think they are competing for your ticket. The top shareholders of all three are BlackRock and Vanguard. This explains why fees are going up, legroom is shrinking, and customer service is disappearing across the board simultaneously. They don't need to be better than the competition because they are the competition. Look at Big Pharma, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck. Who owns them? The Big Three. During the pandemic, vaccines were manufactured by different brands, but the profits flowed into the same investment pools. But the most terrifying example is the media. This is where it stops being about money and starts being about your mind. Turn on the TV. On one channel, you have CNN, owned by Warner Bros. Discovery. They are telling you one version of the truth. They might be leaning left. On the other channel, you have Fox News, owned by Fox Corp. They are telling you the exact opposite. They are leaning right. They seem to hate each other. The anchors attack each other every night. They divide the country into two angry tribes. But guess who the top shareholders are? Warner Bros. Discovery, top owners, Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. Fox Corp, top owners, the Murdoch family, and Vanguard, BlackRock. Do you see the game? Conflict is profitable. Division keeps you watching. Fear keeps you clicking. If you own both sides of the narrative, you don't care who wins the election. You win either way because you control the platform where the debate is happening. They are monetizing your anger. So the next time you see two massive corporations fighting on Twitter or in a commercial, remember, it is professional wrestling. It is scripted. The punches are fake. In the ring, they are enemies, but in the locker room, the boardroom, they are shaking hands and counting your money. They have captured the entire market, but controlling the market wasn't enough for Larry Fink. He needed a tool to predict the future. He needed a weapon that could see every trade, every risk, and every dollar moving on Earth before it happened. And so, he built Aladdin, the artificial intelligence that runs the global economy.
If BlackRock is the empire, then Larry Fink is the emperor. But every emperor needs a general, and BlackRock's general is not a human being. It doesn't sleep, it doesn't eat, it doesn't have feelings. It is a supercomputer system located in a bunker in Wenatchee, Washington. Its name is Aladdin, Asset, Liability, Debt, and Derivative Investment Network. You might think BlackRock became a $10 trillion giant because they have the smartest traders in the world. Wrong. They have the smartest machine in the world. Aladdin is the central nervous system of modern finance. It is an operating system that monitors every single trade, every stock, every bond, every currency, and every disaster happening on Earth in real time. It performs risk analysis. It runs millions of Monte Carlo simulations every day. Basically, it asks, what happens to Apple's stock if China invades Taiwan? Or what happens to the euro if inflation hits 5%? And then it tells BlackRock exactly where to move the money to stay safe. But here is the scary part. Aladdin doesn't just work for BlackRock. Remember the big three, Vanguard and State Street? Guess who they hire to manage their risk? Aladdin. Guess who Microsoft, Apple, and Alphabet use to manage their corporate treasuries? Aladdin. Guess who the pension funds of California and Japan use? Aladdin. So, while BlackRock directly manages $10 trillion, the Aladdin system effectively watches over $21 trillion worth of assets. That is equal to the GDP of the United States. Every major bank, every major insurer, and every major pension fund is looking at the same screen, using the same data, and following the same algorithm. This creates a terrifying problem called herding behavior. Imagine if everyone in a city used the exact same GPS map, and suddenly the GPS told everyone to turn left at the same time. What would happen? A massive crash. If Aladdin decides that tech stocks are risky today, it signals everyone to sell. And because everyone is listening to Aladdin, the market crashes faster and harder than ever before. The fox guarding the henhouse. But the true power of Aladdin was revealed in 2008 and 2020. When the financial crisis hit in 2008, the U.S. government was panicked. They didn't know which banks held the toxic assets. They were flying blind. So who did they call? They called Larry Fink. The Federal Reserve asked BlackRock to use Aladdin to analyze the toxic assets of Bear Stearns and AIG. Think about that. The U.S. government, the most powerful entity on Earth, had to outsource the rescue of the global economy to a private software company. They admitted, "We don't understand the market anymore. Your computer understands it better." They did it again in 2020. When the pandemic crashed the market, the Fed hired BlackRock again to manage the corporate bond buying program. This is the ultimate conflict of interest. BlackRock was allowed to use government money to buy bonds in companies that BlackRock already owned. It's like being the referee and the player in the same game. So, who regulates Aladdin? Nobody. It is proprietary technology. We don't know the code. We don't know the parameters. It is a black box. We just know that the fate of your retirement, your savings, and your currency is decided by lines of code written 30 years ago. But Aladdin isn't just content with controlling the stock market. Recently, it has turned its eyes toward a new asset class, an asset class that is real, tangible, and essential for human survival. It has started looking at housing. And when a $10 trillion monster decides it wants to be your landlord, you don't stand a chance.
For 70 years, the American dream was simple. Go to school, get a job, work hard, and buy a house. Owning a home was your savings account. It was your retirement. It was the only way for the middle class to build generational wealth. But today, that dream is on life support, and someone is trying to pull the plug. In 2026, you aren't just competing with other families when you try to buy a home. You are competing with Wall Street. Imagine this scenario. You save for 10 years. You finally find a modest 3-bedroom house for your family. The asking price is $400,000. You offer $410,000. You're excited. But then the real estate agent calls you with bad news. "I'm sorry, we accepted another offer." You ask, "Who beat us? Did another family offer more?" The agent says, "No. It was an all-cash offer. They paid $450,000, no inspection required, closing in 7 days." Who has that kind of cash lying around? Institutional investors. Companies funded by BlackRock, Blackstone, and Vanguard are sweeping across the country like locusts. They aren't buying skyscrapers, they are buying your neighborhood. They are buying single-family starter homes, the exact homes that young families need. Look at the data.
In some cities like Atlanta, Phoenix, and Charlotte, institutional investors bought over 30% of all homes sold in 2025. Why? Because Aladdin, the AI from the last chapter, did the math. It realized that in a world of high inflation, real assets are better than cash. But more importantly, they realized something darker. If people can't afford to buy, they must rent. They are turning a nation of owners into a nation of renters. This is not capitalism. This is feudalism 2.0. In the Middle Ages, the lords owned the land, and the serfs worked the land and paid rent to live there. Today, BlackRock is the lord, and you are the serf. They are building entire neighborhoods called build-to-rent communities. Imagine a whole subdivision of beautiful new houses, but none of them are for sale. You can only rent them. You pay their mortgage, you build their equity, you make them rich, and in return, you get a roof over your head until they decide to raise the rent by 20% next year. This aligns perfectly with the infamous World Economic Forum prediction, you will own nothing and you will be happy. They got the first part right, you will own nothing, but I doubt you will be happy about it. They want a subscription lifestyle. You subscribe to Netflix for entertainment, you subscribe to Uber for transport, and now you subscribe to Wall Street for shelter. When you own nothing, you have no independence. You are dependent on the system for your survival. And a dependent population is much easier to control. This is the greatest wealth transfer in history. They are taking the one asset that made the middle class strong, home ownership, and turning it into just another line item on their balance sheet. If this makes you angry, good, it should. If you think more people need to know that the housing market isn't broken but is actually rigged, please hit the like button right now. It tells the YouTube algorithm to show this truth to millions of other people who are wondering why they can't afford a home. Let's get this message out. Now, you might be asking, okay, they own the stocks, they own the houses, but surely as a consumer I can still vote with my wallet, right? If I don't like a company, I can boycott them. Well, Larry Fink is one step ahead of you. He created a system to make sure that even if you hate his policies, the CEOs have to follow them. It is a score that determines the fate of every company in America. It is called ESG, and it is the reason your favorite brands are suddenly getting involved in politics.
Have you noticed something strange happening in the corporate world over the last few years? Why did a beer company suddenly decide to insult its own core customers with a controversial marketing campaign? Why did a department store launch a clothing line that alienated half of the country? Why are Hollywood movies and video games seemingly more focused on pushing a political message than telling a good story? It feels like these companies are committing financial suicide. Get woke, go broke, that's what the internet says. But here's the thing, the CEOs of these companies aren't stupid. They know their customers hate it. They know their sales might drop, but they do it anyway. Why? Because they're not trying to impress you. They're trying to impress Larry Fink. There's a new credit score for companies. It's called ESG. E stands for environmental, climate change. S stands for social, diversity, inclusion, politics. G stands for governance, who sits on the board. Every year, Larry Fink writes a letter to CEOs. On the surface, it looks like friendly advice, but in reality, it is a marching order. In these letters, he explicitly tells companies that if they do not adopt sustainable policies and inclusive hiring practices, BlackRock will use its voting power against them. Think about the leverage here. BlackRock owns nearly 10% of almost every major public company. If a CEO says, "No, Larry, I just want to sell good coffee. I don't want to get involved in politics," what happens? Larry Fink can make a phone call. BlackRock can dump millions of shares of that company's stock, crashing the price. Or worse, at the next shareholder meeting, BlackRock can vote to fire the CEO and replace him with someone more obedient. This creates a system of soft coercion. You don't need to pass a law in Congress to change society. You don't need to win an election. You just need to control the capital. If you want to force the entire energy sector to stop drilling for oil, you don't ban oil. You just lower the ESG score of oil companies so they can't get loans or investment.
If you want to force companies to hire based on race or gender quotas instead of merit, you don't pass a law. You just threaten their stock price if they don't comply. This is social engineering disguised as investing. It bypasses democracy entirely. Citizens didn't vote for these policies, but we're living under them because the asset managers demanded them. And here's the ultimate irony. It's your money they're using to do this. They're using the pension funds of conservative oil workers in Texas to force green energy policies that might destroy their own jobs. They're using the retirement savings of regular people to fund political activism that those same people might disagree with. This is the definition of taxation without representation. But instead of a king taxing your tea, it's an asset manager taxing your culture. So when you see a company make a baffling decision that angers its customers, remember this: they calculated the cost. Losing you as a customer might cost them $10 million in sales, but losing their ESG score could cost them billions in stock value and access to capital. They're more afraid of BlackRock than they are of you. But surely the government sees this happening. Surely the regulators would stop one company from having this much political power? Well, that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. The reason the government doesn't stop BlackRock is because the government is BlackRock.
So if BlackRock controls $10 trillion, dominates the housing market, manipulates the stock market with AI, and enforces social policies without a vote, surely the government would step in to break them up. After all, America has laws against monopolies. Teddy Roosevelt broke up Standard Oil. The government broke up AT&T. Why is BlackRock untouchable? Because BlackRock is the government. There's a concept in Washington, D.C. called the revolving door. It works like this. You work at BlackRock for a few years, making millions. Then you take a job in the White House or the Treasury Department to regulate the financial industry. Then, after your term is up, you go back to BlackRock for a massive pay raise. Let's look at the roster. Brian Deese, he was the global head of sustainable investing at BlackRock. Then he became the director of the National Economic Council for President Biden. Wally Adeyemo, he was the chief of staff to Larry Fink at BlackRock. Then he became the deputy secretary of the Treasury. Mike Pyle, he was the global chief investment strategist at BlackRock. Then he became the chief economic advisor to the vice president. Do you see the pattern? The people writing the rules for the economy are the same people who profit from those rules. When they're in the government, do you think they're going to pass laws that hurt their future employer? Of course not. They pass laws that help BlackRock crush its smaller competitors. This explains why during every financial crisis, the solution is always the same. Bail out the big guys, crush the little guys. In 2020, the Federal Reserve hired BlackRock to manage its emergency bond buying program. BlackRock was allowed to buy its own ETFs with taxpayer money. They made millions in fees, while small businesses were being forced to close their doors. This is regulatory capture. The watchdog is being fed by the burglar. And it's not just one political party. BlackRock donates to both Republicans and Democrats. They don't care who wins the election because they have bought insurance on both sides. If the left wins, they push ESG. If the right wins, they push deregulation. Either way, the assets under management go up. This is why nothing ever changes. You vote for change. You get the same policies, because the policies are not written by the politicians you see on TV. They are written by the technocrats you don't see. We are no longer living in a capitalist democracy. We are living in a corporate oligarchy, a system where a few massive companies merge with the state to control every aspect of your life, from the house you rent, to the news you watch, to the price of your food. So where does that leave us? If they own the money, the houses, the media, and the government, is there any way out? Are we doomed to be serfs in Larry Fink's kingdom? Not necessarily, but the window of escape is closing fast. We have connected the dots. From the $10 trillion in assets, to the illusion of competition between Coke and Pepsi, to the AI Aladdin that controls the market, to the housing heist that forces you to rent, the picture is clear. We are entering an era of neo-feudalism. In the old feudal system, the king owned the land and the serfs worked the land. In the new system, BlackRock owns the assets and you subscribe to the assets. You will rent your home, you will rent your car, you will rent your music, and in return, you will give them your data, your privacy, and your freedom. But here is the good news. The system only works if you participate. You can opt out. How? By becoming ungovernable to their algorithm. Stop feeding the beast. Every dollar you spend at a massive conglomerate strengthens their ESG score. Every dollar you spend at a local business, a local farmer, or a small competitor weakens their monopoly. Vote with your wallet. Reject debt. Debt is the chain they use to bind you. If you are debt-free, their interest rate hikes cannot hurt you. Own real assets. They want you to own nothing, so you must own something. Whether it is land, gold, Bitcoin, or your own business, ownership is the only shield against tyranny. Build parallel systems. If the corporate media lies, support independent creators. If the corporate food is poison, grow your own or buy local. The world is splitting into two economies. The centralized economy, run by BlackRock, CBDCs, and ESG, and the decentralized economy, run by individuals, local communities, and hard money. Larry Fink has made his bet. He is betting on control. I am betting on freedom. Which side are you on? If this video opened your eyes to who really runs the world, share it. The algorithm might try to bury this, but you can keep it alive. And if you want to know how to protect your wealth from this system, watch this video next on the death of the dollar. It explains exactly how to exit the matrix.